Hi guys, Katie with Katie Dickson Photography here. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial based on a request that I received all about the eyes and how to make eyes pop in Photoshop. So today I'll show you a few of my favorite retouching techniques and things that I do to my photographs to kind of help make those eyes sparkle a little bit more. So today I've got a lovely picture here that I took in the studio a couple of years ago to do basically a light test, and I figured this would be a great candidate to kind of show a couple of different techniques as far as eyes go. As you can see, I have already done a couple of quick, super basic edits to this photograph. If I just toggle those on and off, you can see that I've just done some basic color correcting, as well as just touching out some flyaways from her hair, and then a little bit of under eye correction and kind of shadow softening on the neck there. But that's really all that I've done. This girl has got gorgeous skin. She really didn't need too much. So just to get into it, I'm going to hold down the Z key and zoom in here to her eyes. I'm also going to push and hold down the H key to use the hand tool to kind of reposition this photo where I want it on my screen. I'm going to be using a Wacom tablet today to do the edits. I can link to that down below. It's my favorite way to do edits, especially when you're kind of dealing with eyes. The first thing I'm going to do is a really fast, quick technique to whiten or brighten the eyes. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to create what's called a stamp visible layer. It basically creates a copy of everything you've done to your image already. And how you do that is I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, the Command key, the Option key, and then click E. And you'll see it's created a new layer here that is basically, if I toggle that to where it's only views that, you see there's no changes, because it's just kind of basically created a stamp of everything here and turn that into a new image basically. So now that I've done that, I'm going to come here and change the blending mode for this layer to screen. And that is basically going to, there it is. That's basically just going to whiten and brighten everything in the image. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Option key and click on the mask icon here to add a black mask over. And then I'm going to select a brush and make sure that the brush color is set to white. So if I switch that, I can toggle that foreground color to white. I'm going to use my keyboard shortcuts on my computer to increase the size of that brush, and I'm just going to double check and make sure that my brush settings are where I want them. So I have a very soft brush. I've got the hardness set to 0. I've got the size, which I just adjusted to about 80 pixels, and I'm actually going to take the flow down to about 15%. And I'm just going to take that soft brush and paint that brightening effect over her eyes here. Just a couple of swipes should do the trick. And then with anything, especially retouching and edits and things, I tend to err on the side of subtlety. I like my edits to be very subtle and natural looking. So one of the things that I like to do to kind of double check that all of those edits are natural is I'm going to zoom back out. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to hold down the Command key and click 0, and it'll take me to full screen. And if you see now, to me and my eye, these eyes are just a little bit too bright. And I'm just going to toggle that layer on and off. And you can see, I mean, she's looking kind of scary. So I'm just going to reduce the opacity of this layer by clicking and just dragging down while I'm looking at the image until it starts to look a little bit more natural and realistic. And I think I like it right there about 50%. I'm also going to rename this layer and call it Eye Brighten. There we go. And so the next technique that I'm going to show you is a couple of different ways to add contrast and detail into the eyes. The first way is very similar to this eye brighten technique, so I'm going to again create another stamp visible layer. And this time I'm going to set my blend mode to soft light, which will, as you can see, increase the color and the contrast on for the image overall. Same as before, I'm going to hold down the Option key and click on the mask icon using a black mask. And then I'm going to zoom back into the eyes with my brush again and just paint that effect over the iris. Oh, I'm painting with black, so let me hit the X key to switch that foreground color to white. And then I'm going to paint that effect over the eye. And I like to, because this does add a little bit of contrast, I do like to paint over the eyelashes just to darken those just a little bit, give a little bit more definition there. I'm going to come over here to the other eye and just paint that effect in. Again, just kind of darkening the eyelashes a bit here. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out again and just toggle this effect on and off. That's actually, I mean, that's made a big difference and a nice improvement. It is still a little too strong for me, so I'm just going to drop that opacity down until it looks a little bit more natural. That looks good. Okay, so that's one way you can add contrast to the eye. And another way, it's a little bit more of an intermediate technique, but I'm going to show it to you anyways. So I'm going to toggle the visibility of this layer off just by clicking on that eyeball. And I'm going to create another stamp visible layer here. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my lasso tool by clicking the L key, and I'm just going to draw a selection around her eyes. And then I'm going to make sure that that selection is feathered up here. About 5 pixels should be good. And that just makes the edges a little bit softer so that they'll blend easier. And you'll see why in just a second. So I'm going to copy this selection by clicking Command C. And then I'm going to create a new layer. And then I'm going to paste that selection into the new layer by clicking on Command V. And you can see that I've done that if I option click on that layer. So only the eyes are on that layer. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go up to the Image menu, go to Adjustments, and then go to Shadows and Highlights. And you can see, if I zoom in here, here we go, that I've got now this dialog box for this tool. So I just kind of mess with the sliders until I start to see something that I like. And I'm only really paying attention to what's going on here in the eye. So I'm going to adjust these shadows. Just make the shadows a little bit darker here. I'm going to adjust the highlight slider here. Now the highlights tends to get a little crazy, so you really are probably not going to want to mess around with that one too much. You're basically just looking to get some more contrast and a little bit more color into the irises. Just kind of ignore what's going on in other parts of that selection. You can also adjust the color, and it will kind of like move the color to be either a little bit more saturated or a little bit more desaturated. And I'm just kind of, again, moving it around till I start to see something that looks interesting to me. And this mid-tone slider is actually one that I really like to use. It's kind of like the clarity slider in Adobe Camera Raw or in Lightroom. And I usually will increase this quite a bit. And your black clippings will kind of adjust your black point and your white point so that you're getting kind of an interesting effect. And if I toggle that preview on and off, you can see that it really does increase like the color and the contrast. So then I'm going to click OK here, and I'm going to again add a black mask and paint the effect into the iris using a white brush. And again, just a little bit on the eyelashes. And depending on the eyes of the person that you photographed, some of these effects might work better than others. This particular girl has got really cool eyes with a lot of like color variations in them, and then the detail in the iris itself is really cool. So a lot of these techniques look really great. So now I'm just going to switch back and forth between the two different kind of contrast adjustments that we made. You can see that the one using the shadows and highlights adjustment has given us a little bit more like sharpening effects. So it's a little bit more, and because of that mid-tone slider where you're adding the clarity in. So I'm going to just name this layer shadows and highlights just to show kind of what I did to it. I'm a big fan of naming my layers. And this one was the soft light layer. And now the stamp visible layer that you use to make the eye copy, you can actually just delete that. And I will often delete that layer just to kind of keep my overall file size small. And the next thing I'm going to show you is how to kind of darken this ring just right around the eyes here. This one is going to be done with a curves layer, so I'm going to select a curves layer here. And I'm just going to drag this midpoint down to darken. And then I'm going to invert the mask to black by clicking Command I. And then I'm going to use my brush tool. I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit more and just paint on this little ring right around the iris. And, you know, they've actually done studies saying that people who have a little bit more contrast between this outer ring and their iris color more attractive than people who don't have as dark of a ring around their eye. So that's why you see this done a lot in beauty photography or like kind of high-end retouching. You'll see that ring around the iris darkened quite a bit. And again, I'm just darkening up those eyelashes because I can't help myself. So I'm going to zoom out, and I'm just going to toggle that layer on and off just to kind of see what it looks like. It's looking pretty good. I like that a lot. And I'm going to just name this layer. And I tend to name my layers just, I don't know, whatever makes sense to me. You certainly don't have to name your layers what I've been naming them. Just do name your layers, because if you don't and you open up this file again in, I don't know, a month, 2 weeks, want to tweak it, anything like that, and you haven't named your layers and you're just kind of like looking through, you'll have to sit there and toggle them on and off all the time trying to figure out which one belongs to which and what does what. So it really will save you a lot of time down the road if you name your layers kind of as you're creating them. So the next thing that I'm going to show you how to do is something that I do to almost all of my retouches. It makes a huge difference, and it's actually a pretty easy an easy thing to do. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to come over to my marquee tool, and I'm going to make sure that I have that set to elliptical marquee. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretty much draw a circle around the iris here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and I'm going to start making a selection around the iris here. And if you hold down the shift key, it will actually constrain it to a perfect circle. And then if you also hold down the spacebar key, you can then move that circle around freely. So I'm just going to make sure that's perfectly over her iris there. Just nudge that down a bit. And then I'm going to come up here to my tools and make sure that this subtract option is selected. What that basically means is that anytime you draw another shape over an existing selection, it will subtract it. And you'll see what I mean here. So if I just click and drag, and then I can hold down shift to make it a perfect circle, hold down the spacebar key to kind of draw it over, and release, it will cut out that other circle from the previous one, giving me this kind of moon shape. I'm then going to, because you can see here in the catch lights in her eyes where I've got my light coming from, so it's kind of coming down from this direction. So I always want to make sure when I'm doing this particular technique that I'm following the direction of the light. Transform this selection by hitting Command T, and I get my transform tools. And then I just want to rotate it just a little bit so that it is kind of following that direction of the light. And I'm going to use my arrow keys on my keyboard just to kind of nudge it around a little bit further. And then what I'm going to do once I've got that selected is you hit enter to accept the transform. Then I'm going to go over here and create another curves layer. And when I do that, it will take that selection. You'll see the little marching ants disappear, but it has created a mask with that selection highlighted. So then if I take my curves and I raise them up and brighten, if you look at that eye, you'll see that selection that I made, and it is brightening just that area. So I'm just going to nudge that up a bit. And then to do the other eye over here, you pretty much do the same thing. So I'm going to hit M to select my marquee, and then I'm going to draw a circle over this iris over here. Just position it. And then I'm going to click and drag to create another circle here. And I'm not going to make sure that this one is perfect. I'm just going to kind of do that. And again, making sure that it kind of follows the direction of the light. And then to fill this with white so that it will add to the mask, all you have to do is hit the Option Delete key, and it will fill that selection with the foreground color, which you want to be white. And then if I deselect so that my marching ants are gone, I can toggle that effect on and off. And if I zoom out, you can definitely see like what a difference that small change made. It just adds a lot of depth and life to the eyes, and I do it to a lot of images, like a whole lot. It's a super easy trick, and it really makes a big difference. So that is going to be my Brighten iris layer. Okay, so now that we've gotten some really basic kind of edits out of the way for the eyes, I'm going to group these together and call these eyes. And then as a group, if I toggle these on and off, you can see what a difference that has made to the eyes in this portrait. And it really kind of, just those small changes really steps it up and gives it a little something special. So this next technique that I'm going to show you is a little bit more on the creative and fun side. It's a little less for a kind of a typical retouch. All of the techniques that I've shown you up to this point are techniques that I use when I'm retouching headshots for people when everything should look like them. You don't want to change anything too drastically. This is going to get a little bit more interesting. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to again kind of zoom back in here. And as you can see, she's got quite a bit of color variation in her eyes, and we're just going to play that up. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new layer over here, just a new blank layer. And then we're going to select our eyedropper and just come in here and select a color that's already existing in her eye. And I'm just kind of going for this kind of reddish brown that's in here. And then in my color picker over here, I'm just going to brighten that up and create, you know, it's pretty much the same color, but a little bit brighter and a little bit more saturated. So then I'm going to use my brush and I'm going to make it kind of small, but still very soft and with a low flow. I might actually increase that flow up to about 30% for this. And then I'm just going to, oh, let's do that a little bit more. Let's increase the flow up to about 80% so that when I'm drawing, it's almost kind of a solid color. And then I'm just going to kind of draw random little squiggles around her eye, kind of where that color already exists. And I know this looks like super bizarre and super scary, but trust me, just give me a second. So then I'm going to add another layer here, and we're going to do the same thing with the eyedropper tool. We're going to select another color that already exists in her eyes here, this blue maybe, and then we're going to just kind of brighten it up and make it a little bit more saturated, and just kind of paint again. I know this is totally looking a little scary. Alright, so I'm going to actually add a third color because, you know, eyes tend to have more than one color in them. And she's wearing this like super fun dress. So I'm actually going to come down here and select a color out of her dress. And I think I'm going to select this kind of really pretty kind of emerald green color. And then we're going to, wow, that is scary. We're going to come back up here, zoom in, and again with our brush, just kind of paint this kind of green in. Maybe keep this a little bit more on the outside, just some little dots in here. Pretty crazy. Alright, so now to make this look a little bit more realistic, what we're going to do is we're going to come and shift click all of these layers to select them all. And again with our blend mode, we're going to take it down to soft light. And it's just going to start kind of blending these colors in. And then we're also going to add a little bit of a blur to these kind of painted layers. And we have to do that individually, but we can go under filter, go to blur, and then Gaussian blur here. And I'm just going to probably keep that at a fairly small radius. And then to blur the next layers, it's actually pretty easy because your filter menu actually remembers the last one that you did. So if you just go to Gaussian blur, it'll just replicate that for the next one. And you can also use a keyboard shortcut. So you select that other layer and go to Command F, and it will apply that blur. And you can see it's starting to kind of blend those colors in a little bit more. And you know how I like to do. So I'm actually going to group these layers together. And I'm going to just reduce the opacity just a little bit on this. And if I zoom out here, you can see like how much more color that has added to her eyes, and really given some additional depth and dimension. And you can of course use this technique in a bunch of different ways. You can, you know, paint a solid color throughout the entire iris and use the soft light blend mode to help help show that through. You could make her eyes lavender that way. I just like to use a mix of different colors, especially for someone who's already got hazel eyes where she's got some color variation in her eyes already. So those are a few of my favorite techniques on how to enhance eyes in Photoshop. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up below, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe to my channel. Also, if you guys have any additional requests or anything that you'd like to see from me, pop those in the comments below. I'd love to take a look and see what I can do. Thanks. Have a great day. See you next time. I can't see myself and it's kind of crazy. I hope you guys enjoyed. Oh, Lord. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and that you learned a little bit of